بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب صدق الله العظيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Last Monday we had covered the persecution of the companions and by extension the persecution that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself had to face. The climate that was in Mecca at that time, the climate of persecution, led the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to think of other measures that need to be taken at this point. Because the Muslims are in a very difficult situation. Till when do you agree and let the people of Quraysh abuse you? And when do you stand up for yourself? So the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, through revelation, he was revealed to, in which Allah Azza wa Jal allowed for the Muslims to immigrate at that time. The Muslims were given permission. So the Messenger of Allah ﷺ and his companions, they began searching for a place where the Muslims could migrate to. And after looking through many places, it seems that the place that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, although it was not through revelation, but the place where, according to his best judgment, the Muslims could live freely and worship Allah and were able to fulfill their rights of Islam, was Abyssinia. In Arabic it is known as Habasha. It is located today in modern-day Ethiopia, partially. And it appears that there was some sort of a connection between the people in Mecca, the people of Quraysh, and the people of Abyssinia. Perhaps through trade, or perhaps through some other means. Because you don't just send your people away to a foreign land. So because the Messenger of Allah ﷺ knew about the people of Abyssinia, and in particular, Ayman radiallahu anha, she was Abyssinian. Who remembers who was Ayman? Baraka, Ayman. Anybody? Yeah. Ayman. Yeah, her name was Baraka, yeah.
Was she like the caretaker?
The caretaker, very good. MashaAllah. The caretaker of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu Ayman was actually a slave, but she would later be freed, and she was the one, if you remember back several months ago when we spoke about when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu passed away, she was the one that was with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu on the way back from Medina to Mecca. On that journey where the Prophet sallallahu his mother Amina passed away, she was with the Prophet sallallahu. And from that point onwards, Abdul Muttalib had told Ayman, whose name was Baraka, that your duty is, you're freed, the only thing you have to do is take care of Muhammad. Because he has nobody left to take care of him. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ would say about Ayman that إِنَّمَا هِيَ بَقِيَّةُ أَهْلِ بَيْتِي. Ayman is really the only family I have left after losing his parents. So Ayman was Abyssinian as well. Bilal radiallahu anhu was Abyssinian as well. So he must have asked them about Abyssinia, and he concluded that Abyssinia is a safe place. So he pointed and he directed his companions radiallahu anhum, and he said to them, لو خرجتم إلى أرض الحبشة فإن بها ملكا لا يظلم عنده أحد. It would be appropriate for you if you migrated to Abyssinia, because there is a king that rules over Abyssinia, لا يظلم عنده أحد. This king, nobody is oppressed under his rule. وهي أرض صدق, and it's a land of peace. حتى يجعل الله لكم فرجا مما أنتم فيه. Until Allah finds for us another solution, this seems to be the best solution. And immediately we start learning from this that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, if he is praising a Christian king, because Al-Najashi, what was his... Al-Najashi is not really his name. We generally say Al-Najashi is his name, but Al-Najashi is the English equivalent of the Negus. Similar to how you had for many other emperors, it was a family name. Similar to Fir'aun. Fir'aun is actually not his name, the Pharaoh. There were many Fir'auns. So his actual name was Ashraba, and he was the Najashi, he was the Negus, the emperor. And the Messenger of Allah ﷺ praised him for these qualities, although he was a Christian king. And he allowed for them to migrate, and immediately we learn that Islam is a very practical religion. Islam is a very practical religion. And Islam at the same time does not discriminate between a Muslim and a non-Muslim. It does differentiate between a Muslim and between a non-Muslim that opposes Islam, that is an enemy to Islam, and a non-Muslim that is a peaceful ally. And the example of the migration to Abyssinia is a great example. And for us living here, in many ways, it is a similar model, where we are in a non-Muslim majority land. Although there may not be one dominant religion from the governmental sense, but nonetheless it is a land in which the majority is of non-Muslims. So if many times people will say, well, this is a land of the kuffar, or this is a land of the disbelievers, so we can't live here. But the example of the companions migrating to Abyssinia tells us otherwise. That you can live in a land in which there is a majority of non-Muslims, and you can and you will and you should abide by their laws. Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he sent them, he said, don't cause controversy and don't go against the laws of that land. So the Muslims, they lived peacefully, and at the very beginning actually they did not even do their da'wah, because it was not that type of a climate. And they lived as peaceful citizens, law-abiding citizens. And for us living here as Muslim minorities here in other countries, there is a very profound parable in the example of the Muslims in Abyssinia. So the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, he says to them, it's a land of peace, so you should migrate. So and this is in the 5th year of the Hijrah. In the 5th year of the Hijrah, in the month of Rajab. So 14 companions, radiallahu anhum, they come together and they agree to migrate. And amongst these 14, at the very forefront, you'll find Uthman radiallahu anhu, and his wife, Ruqayya radiallahu anha. Uthman and Ruqayya radiallahu anhuma. Ruqayya was the daughter of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you remember a while back, we had said how Uthman ibn Affan married her. So Uthman and Ruqayya, they're married, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say that إِنَّهُمَا لَأَوَّلُ مَنْ هَاجَرَ بَعْدَ لُوطٍ وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَيْهِمَ السَّلَامِ. That Ruqayya and Uthman are the first to migrate for the sake of Allah after Lut and Ibrahim alayhi salam. Because if you remember in Surah Hud and other places, there is a long discussion in the Quran in which Lut alayhi salam and Ibrahim alayhi salam both would migrate from their nations. And after them, the Prophet ﷺ, he says that Uthman and Ruqayya are the first. They are to lead this migration, and we learn that this migration, you cannot call the companions of anhum cowards for doing this migration, because as we'll learn, this migration actually was a form of da'wah in and of itself. It was a form of Islam flourishing in another area. So immediately these companions are ready to leave. And amongst the men other than Uthman ibn Affan is the companion Az-Zubayr ibn al-Awam. And we mentioned him and how he became a Muslim, and Mus'ab ibn Umayr. Mus'ab ibn Umayr was the very young companion whom I spoke about last week, and his struggles in Islam. He was from a very affluent family. He was amongst them. Abdurrahman ibn Auf, who was one of the most wealthiest of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, was amongst them, and Abu Salama, and a number of other companions. And similarly on the women, there were 4 women, and 4 of them were wives to 4 of the men. So you have a total of 11 men and 4 women that migrate together. Now, before we move forward, what you have to understand is that migration is actually a very, very difficult thing for these people to do. Simply for the reason that getting up and leaving what you have, your house, your business, everything, getting up and leaving meant that you're literally burning it. You're getting rid of it. None of that will be left for you. See, for us, traveling and moving is something relatively easy. You take your money, you transfer it through an account, you get a job in a new place, you sell your house, or if you're renting, you go out and rent another apartment, you buy another house, you'll find another car, you can take your car there. It's very easy for us to kind of move from place to place. And many of us sitting here, perhaps we grew up in a different city, and now we're here, and maybe we'll get another job and we'll move somewhere else. So it's a very common theme. At that time, simply due to the structure of society, it was very difficult to migrate. So when you're telling someone that they have to leave everything behind, realize that many of these companions radiallahu anhum who were wealthy, a lot of these companions that are migrating, as you can see from their names, are not the slaves. Bilal is not amongst these people. Ammar is not amongst these people. These are wealthy companions. Simply for the reason that the companions that were slaves, if they fled, they would face a great amount of persecution from the place they went to as well, because they were slaves. So they had to remain in Mecca. But at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ, he realized that if some people can go and migrate and be saved from the persecution, and if others can't, then this is something from Allah, and at least these people would be saved. You have to be very practical. Now, migration, I said, is something very difficult. Add to that the fact that when you migrate, basically you have no protection. Because the default rule in that society is that you are at war, except if there is someone to back you, and except if you sign a peace treaty. So when you leave the people of Quraysh, anybody comes to loot you, comes to rape you, comes to harm you, you cannot do anything to protect yourself. A group comes because you've migrated and left your people, so those people will no longer stand up for you. So this was a very, very difficult decision for these companions to take. Nonetheless, they took this decision, the 14 total companions of anhum, and they fled at nighttime. Secretly, Ibn Ishaq says, يَتَسَلَّلُونَ, secretly they left and they headed for what is known as modern-day Jeddah, or Jeddah. And at that time it was known as Jeddah, and it was a port city. Today it continues to be a port city. It was a port city at that time, and it was about a journey of 1 or 2 days from Mecca. So they left at the nighttime, and they didn't have much, they couldn't take much. Obviously you have to leave at a time where people are sleeping, otherwise people would figure out that something is going on. So they leave, and on their way out, actually, it's very interesting, as we will learn in our next halaqah, the stories of Umar radiallahu anhu and Hamza radiallahu anhu accepting Islam. And this was actually the turning point for Umar radiallahu anhu, because while these people were leaving, the one man that they came into contact with was Umar ibn al-Khattab. They're on their way out, and Umar ibn al-Khattab was out of the city for some reason, and he sees them. And now they're scared, because Umar radiallahu anhu is known to be a harsh man, and he's a disbeliever. So they find out that perhaps Umar would harm us, and if Umar doesn't harm us, he'll go and tell the people of Quraysh. But Umar radiallahu anhu, although he was harsh, he had a soft side to him as well. And this soft side came out at this point. So Umar radiallahu anhu, he asked them, he said, "Where are you going?" Initially in anger. And he said that, they're debating what they should say. And Layla, who was one of the women, she spoke up and she said, "You know what, I'm just going to say it. We're fleeing this land because you guys have made this place, Mecca, our beloved city, it's basically hell for us. We have nothing left, we have no reason left why we should not migrate. So what do you want us to do?" And Umar radiallahu anhu, he had a moment of realization. So he said to himself, and he said to Layla and the companions, he said, "Have things gotten this bad? Have things gotten this bad that you have to leave your own homeland?" Nobody wants to leave their homeland. And at that point they said, "Yes, you're in front of us, we're being persecuted in every form." So Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, "Then may Allah be with you." He made a dua for them. Although he was not a Muslim at that time, but they did believe in Allah, although they believed in their idols as well. So he said, "May Allah be with you." And Umar went back, and Umar radiallahu anhu, he did not tell the people of Quraysh. And at that time, when Layla's husband came back, perhaps he was away with some of the animals, or he was left behind. She said, "Should I tell you who came? Should I tell you who came and we spoke to him about our migration?" He said, "Who?" And she said, "Umar ibn al-Khattab." And she said that perhaps I feel that his heart softened for us. So her husband, radiallahu anhu, he said, the famous statement, he said, لَحِمَارُ بَيْتِ الْخَطَّابِ. He said that the donkey of the house of Umar would accept Islam before Umar accepts Islam. A blanket statement. Many times we make these statements. We say, hell will freeze before this person can come to the masjid, right? But Umar radiallahu anhu, see how things will change, and Umar radiallahu anhu will become one of the most prestigious of the companions radiallahu anhu. And in it there's a lesson for us that many times we wipe people off. We cross people off, that this person is never coming to the masjid. This person is never going to change. A few years later, the roles might be reversed. Somebody asked me a few weeks ago at the SLU conference about how to fight the arrogance that comes within us when we see someone else sinning. And really I told him, if you think of it, the Prophet ﷺ said that a person continues to do good until a point comes where he is only a handspan away from Jannah. He is near Jannah, but he does an action that takes him away and makes him from the people of fire, and vice versa. So we don't know if we come today to pray in the masjid, or if we pray, or if we do any good, tomorrow that tawfiq, that divine guidance could be taken from us. And if somebody else is struggling with their faith, tomorrow their faith could get stronger and our faith be weaker. So before we judge anyone and before we wipe anyone else off, let's reflect on the story of Umar radiallahu anhu, and how he is being wiped and scratched off by this companion, that Umar's donkey would accept Islam before Umar. But Umar radiallahu anhu, shortly thereafter, he would accept Islam. So this happens on the way there. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, his name was not mentioned, as you may see. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu initially was with the companions. But on the way there, a chieftain of a neighboring tribe by the name of Ibn Daghina, he would see Abu Bakr and the companions, and he'd ask them that, where are you headed? And they told him that we're going to Abyssinia. So he said, Abu Bakr, I know things are tough, but it is not befitting of you to migrate. You are a sayyid of your people. You are a leader of your people. So you need to head back. And he said that if you are worried that people would find out and they would hurt you for this, then come with me, and I'll guarantee that you won't be hurt. It's a tribal society, so when a chieftain says that this person is under my protection, that has to be honored. So the next day, Ibn Daghina would take back Abu Bakr, and he would announce that Abu Bakr is to stay in Mecca and he is under my protection. So let not anybody hurt Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, they said, we agree to this with the condition that Abu Bakr does not worship openly. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would worship secretly until the point that actually it occurred to him that although I can worship in my house, so why don't I make a masjid in my house? Right? Many times we think the first masjid in Islam is the Masjid Quba, which is accurate in its own sense because it's the building and everything. But essentially a masjid, a dedicated place for praying, was the house of Abu Bakr. And at that time, if many of you who have visited the eastern lands, you'll know that outside of your house you have a little sihin, or a fina in the Arabic as they say, sihin in Urdu as they say, which is basically an open space outside of your house. So in that place, Abu Bakr dedicated that to be a masjid, and he would pray, and some of the companions would join him. And naturally, you're living small alleyways, small streets, houses are close to one another, so naturally people would hear, and this would be a source of great controversy. So Ibn Daghina would be called, and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu would say that I'm simply praying in my house. It's my property. And they would leave, and this would be actually a great form of da'wah, that many people would constantly pass through these streets, and they would hear Abu Bakr reciting the Quran, and they would interact with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. In any case, the companions radiallahu anhu, they are now heading for Jeddah. And when they reach Jeddah, they find a captain who owns a ship, and he makes a deal with them for a very small amount that he's willing to take them. So it's about a few days' journey, and they head south to Abyssinia. And they reach Abyssinia, and over there they present their case to the Negus and Najashi via petition. They wrote it out, they did not meet the Najashi actually. And after getting there, once they have completed the deal, the agreement, they are allowed to live freely. And for a number of time, they would stay there peacefully, they would worship Allah, and they minded their own business as peaceful citizens. A few months later, this was in Rajab, the 5th year after prophethood, a few months later in Ramadan, an interesting incident would happen in Mecca. And that is that the Prophet ﷺ would obviously continue to pray. One day he was praying in the Haram, and it was a windy, breezy night. And he was praying as usual, and Surah An-Najm was revealed to him. And Surah An-Najm is one of the most powerful surahs from a rhetorical point of view. From the balagha of the Quran, is one of the most powerful surahs. Surah An-Najm, the Prophet ﷺ is reciting out loud. And the people of Quraysh, one by one, they come close to hear. And this would happen many times, but at this particular occasion, a good number of people had come out. And this was the first surah that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud would say, أول سورة أنزلت فيها سجدة. The first surah in which there is a sajda that was revealed. You know, many times when we pray Taraweeh prayers, and the entire Quran is recited, many times we come across an ayah in which the word sajada is mentioned in some form, and then we do a sajda, right? Those are ayat in which Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about praying and speaks about sajda. So in that particular case, He would make sajda. So this is the first of these. The first of these ayat to be revealed is the ayah of in Surah An-Najm. So the Prophet ﷺ is there, and these ayat, and they are very powerful. I wish to do a tafsir on this surah sometime. أَفَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي تَوَلَّى وَأَعْطَى قَلِيلًا وَأَكْدَى. It's a series of questions, and really the build up for anybody that knows Arabic. If you hear it, it really builds you up, and you can feel it. The power of the Quran in these particular verses. And at the end, for the first time, a direct order was revealed to make sajda. And the companions were in awe when this surah was revealed, and they all fell in sajda. And the mushrikun, the people of Quraysh, they were also listening, and they were blown away by this. And they were overcome, and seeing this moment where all the companions are in sajda together, they fell in sajda as well. Except for one man, who was Umayyah ibn Khalaf, one of the chief enemies of Islam. He was the only man. He was so arrogant, he said, I won't even do sajda at this time, but I'm so blown away by this, that I'll tell you what. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud says, أَخَذَ كَفًّا مِّن تُرَابٍ فَسَجَدَ عَلَيْهِ. He took a bit of dirt and he put it to his forehead. He said, I'll do this, as a sign of respect. So this really blew them away. Now, these people, the people of Quraysh, they now come together and they say, what has happened? You all have done sajda. Everything went wrong. And then they conclude amongst themselves, they say, no, you know what, don't worry about it. This was just some sorcery. It was magic, and we can agree to forgive one another. Let's forgive one another, and this is a mistake. A one-time mistake, we'll look over it. And so now they begin to plot, and they begin to worry about those Muslims that have left. And it so happens that by the time that they are plotting and worrying, that what will happen to those Muslims, because they do find out eventually when they don't see Uthman, when they don't see Zubayr, they know something has happened and word has spread. So, at this same time, a rumor begins to spread. And the rumor is that the people of Quraysh have accepted Islam. And this makes perfect sense because of this story. Because we learn from this story that they made sajda, and if you made sajda, generally speaking, you became a Muslim. So it's making a lot of sense at the time to the Muslims. And in Abyssinia, they received this news. And obviously the trade route is there. People are going back and forth, so you find out. And we also learn from another hadith that how we know that there was communication between people going back and forth was that the Prophet ﷺ would ask a businessman who came from Abyssinia about his family, about Uthman and about Ruqayyah and about the rest of them. And how are those people doing? And he would say, they're well, they're good. And the Prophet ﷺ would ask him specifically, did you see a young couple? Did you see a young couple? And they had a mule with them, an old mule. And he said, yes, I saw them. And the wife was riding the mule and the husband was holding the reins to it, walking. And the Prophet ﷺ immediately knew that this was Uthman and Ruqayyah. And look at how concerned the Prophet ﷺ is about his children and about the companions that have migrated. And this is the quality of a great leader, that he's always concerned about his people. So while this news spreads, the Muslims in Abyssinia, they come to the conclusion that the Quraysh have accepted Islam. So it makes sense for us to now go back. Because the very reason that we're here is because the Quraysh have been persecuting the Muslims. Now that the Quraysh have accepted Islam, it makes perfect sense for us to go back. So the companions of radiallahu anhum, a few of them stay back, and a few of them, they go onwards. And now when they reach close to Mecca, obviously people are going in and out. They ask people around them and they say, we have heard that Quraysh has accepted Islam. And they find out very quickly that this is a lie. This is a false rumor. So they come together and they're discussing amongst themselves. What do we do now? now that we know that Quraysh hasn't accepted Islam. And they realize that they're very close to Mecca at this time. And Uthman ibn Mad'un, who is different from Uthman ibn Affan, there are two Uthmans. Uthman ibn Mad'un is with them. And Uthman ibn Mad'un, we spoke about him very earlier. He is a companion from a relatively weak background. And he realizes quickly that we should go back home. It's been so long. Why not just enter and see what's going on in Mecca? You know, I miss home. I miss my family. So Uthman ibn Mad'un, Abu Salama, and a few other companions, anhum, they head into Mecca at that time. And when they head into Mecca, Uthman ibn Mad'un, he obviously needs somebody to keep him under his protection. Because as I mentioned, at this point you are a rebel. You've left your city, you've left your people. So if you go into Mecca, you would be persecuted and perhaps even killed. So Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, Uthman, he approaches him. And Al-Walid was he was a leader of the Quraysh. And so Uthman said that, can you give me asylum? Would you allow for me to be under your protection? And Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, he somehow agreed. And he said, sure. You know what, sure. You're under my protection, don't worry about it. And Abu Salama radiallahu anhu, he would seek the protection of Abu Talib. Now these two companions, they're there. And very quickly, Uthman ibn Mad'un, once it's known, people are gathering around to try to ask about Habasha and Abyssinia. What happened in Abyssinia? How are the Muslims doing over there? How is their experience over there? And what happens is that in one of the nadis, in one of the get-togethers, one of the social gatherings, what would happen is that Labid ibn Rabi'ah, who is a very famous poet, he was there at that particular event. You can say that equivalent of our poetry nights or spoken word nights, something of that sort. So you see that Labid is there and Uthman is there. And Uthman, his Islam is really in him, his Iman is in him, so he can't really hold on to listening to something that goes against that. He has to speak up. So Labid, he's reading poetry. And people get very moved, obviously. It's a very intense moment when you're hearing poetry and you're going back and forth. Labid, he says, أَلَا كُلُّ شَيْءٍ مَا خَلَى اللَّهَ بَاطِلٌ. And this is a very famous line that even till today you'll find in the books of Arabic. For those that study Arabic, in the very beginning books, this poem is discussed. He says, أَلَا كُلُّ شَيْءٍ مَا خَلَى اللَّهَ بَاطِلٌ. Verily, indeed, everything in this world other than Allah, batil, is false. Meaning everything other than that takes you away from Allah, it really takes you away from your purpose. There's not much benefit to it. And Uthman, he got up and he said to him, Sadaqta. He said to him, Sadaqta. This is the equivalent of, in our, for those that are from the Indian subcontinent, you'll have a wahwa, or for the Arab brothers, they'll have a loud takbir, when poetry is being read, in that particular moment. So you're feeling it, so you say that out loud. So Uthman said, Sadaqta. He said, you've spoken the truth. And then Labid said, وَكُلُّ نَعِيمٍ لَا مَحَالَةَ زَائِلُ. And he said, every blessing, at one point, every blessing will diminish. It will go away. And to this, Uthman, he couldn't help himself, so he said, no, kadabta. He said, no, you're lying. He said, kadabta. نَعِيمُ الْجَنَّةِ لَا يَزُولُ. I'll tell you, Jannah will never go away. Jannah is forever. So every blessing will go away except for Jannah. Say that. And Labid, he feels insulted. Imagine you're a guest, and a guest visits you, and all of a sudden, he's the chief guest. In front of everybody, you get up and you say, no, you're lying. What you're saying doesn't make sense. That's what he says. So he turns around, and he says to, Al-Walid, who's sitting there, he says that, do you see, is this how you guys treat your guests now? I've come from outside to perform in front of you, and you guys have insulted me. And Al-Walid, he ends up slapping, although he's under his protection, he ends up slapping Uthman ibn Mad'un. And he says, you've lost my protection now because you've gone against the unwritten code, so to speak, of the Quraysh. So he ends up slapping him, and it so happens that after he slaps him and he leaves that, after a while he says to him, Al-Walid says to Uthman, he says, أَمَا وَاللَّهِ يَبْنَ أَخِي إِنْ كَانَتْ عَيْنُكَ عَمَّا أَصَابَهَا لَغَنِيَّةٌ لَقَدْ كُنْتَ فِي ذِمَّةٍ مَنِيعًا. He says, look at your eye. Look at what you've done to yourself. If you had only obeyed these laws, and if you had only stuck to what I had said, you would have been under my protection. فَخَرَجْتَ مِنْهَا. But because of what you did, you've now left my protection. وَكُنْتَ عَنِ الَّذِي لَقِيتَ غَنِيًّا ثُمَّ ضَحِكُوا. And they began to laugh at him. They said, what an idiot, what a fool. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. They began to laugh at him. So Uthman, he said the very famous statement, that is a statement of courage at this time. Because he realizes there's not much he can say. So he says, بَلْ كُنْتُ إِلَى الَّذِي لَقِيتُ فَقِيرًا. He said, no, I needed this. I needed this. Because I want to feel my iman. I want to give something in the path of Allah. وَاللَّهِ إِنَّ عَيْنَيَّ الصَّحِيحَةَ الَّتِي لَمْ تُلْطَمْ لَفَقِيرَةٌ إِلَى مَا أَصَابَ أُخْتَهَا. He says, my one eye, if you wish to hit my other eye, because of something I'll do in disregard, I'll bear with that. I'll bear with that for the sake of Islam. وَلِي فِي مَنْ هُوَ أَحَبُّ إِلَيَّ مِنْكُمْ أُسْوَةٌ وَإِنِّي وَاللَّهِ لَفِي جِوَارِ مَنْ هُوَ أَعَزُّ مِنْكَ. Today, if I'm being tried, nonetheless, I am under the permanent protection of Allah. You can give me protection for a while, but Allah's protection will never go away. And in the akhirah, at the end of the day, I have Allah's protection. And then Walid, he felt he was softened, so he said, إِن شِئْتَ أَجَرْتُكَ الثَّانِيَةَ. If you want, I can give you back my protection. And he declined. Similarly was the case of Abu Salama. Abu Salama, he went to Abu Talib, and Abu Talib radiallahu anhu, not radiallahu anhu, he never accepted Islam. Abu Talib, he agreed to give Abu Salama, who was his uncle, he agreed to give him his protection. But at that time, the people of Quraysh, they were already frustrated. So they went up to Abu Talib and they said that, you've already given Muhammad and you've already given all of these people your protection. You've already given them your protection. You're adding on to it. And at this time, Abu Talib is now growing older. So he's weaker. So they're all kind of gathered around him. And Abu Talib is now scared that these people might overthrow me. They might revolt against me. So Abu Talib, he's standing there, and ironically, out of all people that come to the defense of Abu Talib, not out of love for Islam, but out of love for his tribe, was Abu Lahab. He was his brother after all. So Abu Lahab, he comes out, and he says to them that, what are you doing to this shaykh, this old man? Why are you guys bothering him? مَا تَزَالُونَ تَتَوَاثَبُونَ عَلَيْهِ. You continue to bother him while you see me here? وَاللَّهِ لَتَنْتَهُنَّ عَنْهُ. Wallahi, I swear by Allah, you would stop this. أَوْ لَنَقُومَنَّ مَعَهُ فِي كُلِّ مَا قَامَ بِهِ. Or you'll see me and my people will stand with Abu Talib. At the end of the day, he's our brother. We'll stand with him. And so they backed off when they saw this. SubhanAllah, this was from Allah. And they said that, okay, fine, we agree and we won't bother you. And Abu Talib at that point, he had not accepted Islam and he did not accept Islam, but he made a pitch to Abu Lahab and he said, Abu Lahab, you've taken the right path. The path to protect these people, why don't you come and announce openly your protection for the Muslims? But Abu Lahab, obviously that was only a moment that he had, he said, no, I'm not interested in this. Now, while this is going on, these people have come back and they realize, and other Muslims realize now, that Abyssinia and Habasha was a safe haven for the Muslims. So the Muslims that were being persecuted at that time, a good number of them, they went to the Prophet ﷺ and they said that, what if we migrate as well? What if we migrate as well? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, this has been a good experience, and you know what, we can try. So the Prophet ﷺ, he allowed these companions to gather, about 80 or 84 companions in total, a majority of them men and about 10 to 20 women. They would migrate this time, and this time you had some slaves, you had a mixture of different classes of society, and they would migrate, and this would be known as the second immigration to Abyssinia. And at this time, now when the Quraysh sees that all of these people have left, and the Prophet ﷺ appointed Ja'far ibn Abi Talib as their leader, who was a young man, and he was Ali radiallahu anhu's brother, the Quraysh, they are now seeing that the people of the Muslims have left. 84 left now, and 16 had gone before. About around 100, almost 100 Muslims have left. And that's a big shock to the people of Quraysh. Because according to them, they thought that the Muslims could not establish themselves, but now they're seeing that the Muslims were in Abyssinia, the first immigration happened, now they came back, and now that even more Muslims went. Before you know, they'll have their own state, they'll have their own community. What if they come to attack us? So many things are going on at the back of their heads. So they devise a plan. And they say that we need to come up with a plan to stop these people. But the problem is that the Negus and Najashi, Ashuma, he is a just king. And he won't simply hand them over. So we need a few politicians, if you may, deep thinkers, if you may, to come together and put together a master plan. How do we go and travel to Abyssinia and convince the Negus to hand over these Muslims to us? And then we can do what we were doing with them. So Salama radiallahu anha, she was amongst those that migrated, and really of this period in Abyssinia, there's very few ahadith that we actually have about this period. And Salama is the one that majority of the ahadith are from her, because she would live on longer, and she would narrate these stories obviously to the Prophet ﷺ, and obviously to the other companions. So we learn from Salama, because of her, we learn much about this particular period in time. And what's interesting to know is that the second immigration takes place, and some of the Muslims, afterwards, they will come to Medina when the Prophet ﷺ would go on to Medina, but many of the people would actually stay in Abyssinia. Till the 7th or the 8th year in Hijrah, they would come at that time, even when Medina was established. So again, we learn that living in a non-Muslim land, in and of itself, if you are living with peace and you are allowed freedom to practice your religion, there's not anything wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. If it was wrong, the Prophet ﷺ would have called those companions back from Abyssinia and said, no, now we have an Islamic country, you have to live with us here. And he let them live in Abyssinia in peace, and when they wished, they would migrate back. So Salama radiallahu anha, she tells us, and she says that, we come in the second immigration, نزلنا أرض الحبشة, we come and we settle down, جاورنا بها خير جار النجاشي. She said, we have the best possible place, and Najashi is the best possible man. أمنا على ديننا. He said, look, worship what you want to worship. We, it's a different experience for us, because now you're learning to, you're having the pleasure of worshiping without facing persecution, right? You don't have to be scared about anyone. Before, if you had to pray, initially the Muslims will go out, or they go into Dar al-Arqam, you're always scared, right? Someone is looking behind you. Did someone see me praying? Is someone coming? You're always scared. Now you have freedom, and freedom is priceless. So they're experiencing it firsthand. So Salama says we were having an amazing time. And then all of a sudden we find out that the news has reached Quraysh, and they've come up with a plan, and they chose 2 men amongst them. رَجُلَيْنِ جَلْدَيْنِ, not necessarily strong in the physical sense, but 2 men that were the most powerful men in Quraysh, known for their intellect and known for their planning. Amr ibn al-As, who was from the Banu Umayyah at that time, was one of them, and the other one was the son of al-Walid ibn Mughira, known as Umar. And Umar was, he was a young man who was known to be a great speaker, and he was the face of Quraysh to be in the future. And Amr ibn al-As was one of the current chieftains. So they send these 2, and what they do is they call a grand meeting, and they raise funds. They have a fundraiser, right, like we have. So they have a fundraiser too, except it's against Islam. So they have a fundraiser, they collect money, and what do? With that money, they buy the most expensive gifts. Because they're thinking now, if we're going there, we have to bribe them. So what better way to give gifts, right? We know today as lobbying, right? So they're lobbying in their own way, right? And obviously, at that time, the Muslims, when they went, they didn't take anything like that. Mostly because they never had anything, and because the Prophet ﷺ was actually against gifting in this particular context. Which is why actually, later on, during the Islamic Khilafah, the policy throughout Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali's time, radiallahu anhu, was that you were not allowed to gift a government official while they were at that particular post. And it happened during the Prophet's time. He sent out someone to collect zakat. There were people assigned. We give our zakat individually here, but obviously when you have an Islamic country, then you have people assigned to collect the zakat. So one of these people, he came back and he came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said that this is the zakah money, and these are the gifts that I got. And the Prophet ﷺ said to him that no. When you are working under the Khilafah, when you are working for the Muslims, and when you are collecting an obligation such as zakah, you will receive no gifts. Politicians do not receive gifts. This was a policy set in place by the Prophet of Allah ﷺ, and he said, go back and return those. When you are not on this particular post, then you may receive your gifts. So the people of Mecca, they come together, they buy gifts, and in particular, they slaughtered red camels. Red camels were known to be the most precious of all camels. And that's why many times you'll hear in the hadith, the Prophet said, XYZ is better for you than red camels. Right? The Prophet like, what's the point of red camels? But red camels for them were the most precious types of camels. So when you say red camels, it's the most expensive thing or the most valuable thing that you can think of. So they slaughtered 100 red camels and they prepared the most fine hides, the most fine skins. They prepared them and they packed them very beautifully because the people of Abyssinia, they did not have access to leather skins, and in particular camel skins. And they would obviously use them for different types of clothing and decoration and all other things. So they prepared these gift baskets and whatnot, and they sent these people out to Al-Najashi in Abyssinia. Now, Amr ibn al-As and Umara, they get there, and what they do is before they go to the Negus, they start from the bottom, right? They're smart. So you don't go directly to the king, you go to his wazirs, you go to his ministers, you go to his, the people that work for him at different posts, the minister of this, the minister of that. So they go to these people, Batariq as they're known, and they go to their religious figures as well, and they go and they give each of them gifts, and they speak to each of them, they say that, look, this is what we're here for, and we're here for a very valid reason, that our people have left us. And they would go to each and every one of them, and they would say the same thing. قَدْ ضَوَى إِلَى بَلَدِ الْمَلِكِ مِنَّا غِلْمَانٌ سُفَهَاء. They would call them غِلْمَانٌ سُفَهَاء. They said some young, foolish people have left us, and they've فَارَقُوا دِينَ قَوْمِهِمْ. They've left the religion of their people, right? And they're not in your religion either. So they're trying to incite them against the Muslims. They're not on your religion either. جَاءُوا بِدِينٍ مُبْتَدَعٍ. They've come with a new religion. You don't know this religion, we don't know this religion, and they've seeking refuge under you. And now we wish for you to join us. Come together, we'll go to the Negus together, and we'll speak to him. We'll speak to him, we'll present our case, and you have to help us and say that these people are right in what they say, and you should return the Muslims with them. Now, obviously, these are the ministers. They're obviously blown away by the gifts, and they're thinking, what is there to lose? So they come together the next day, and they gather in his palace, and the emperor, the Negus, is sitting on his throne, and they present their case. And they give a whole lecture. Amr ibn al-As, he does not give a lecture himself, rather one of the wazirs, one of the ministers, he brings him and he says that he'll tell you. Right? Don't hear from us, we're foreigners. Your own minister will tell you who are these people. And he gives a long speech, which is long in Arabic. I'll just summarize it. He gives a long speech bad-mouthing the Muslims and saying that these are rebels, these are people that if you keep them, these people will only cause corruption in your land. Hence we say it's better to just hand them over to us. Right? So he at this time, the Negus, he's sitting there in deep thought, and he actually gets angry. He says that, is this the only reason why? He said, no. Amr ibn al-As says, no, all of this, and add to that the fact that they're our own slaves. They're our own slaves. So, isn't it all right? It's the current custom. That's what it dictates. So, the Negus, he said, okay, fine, you know what? I'll agree with what you say, but on one condition. Call the Muslims, and I want to hear their side of the story. He was a just king, as the Prophet said. So he calls the Muslims, and the Muslims, they send Ja'far ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu, right? When we speak of the companions and you just say Ja'far was sent, understand who Ja'far was. Ja'far is only 23 years old. He's a young man. And you have companions that are senior. But Ja'far was a talented speaker. And he was known to be an excellent diplomat. And we learn from this that when we send someone out, whether we put someone on the minbar to speak to us, or whether we send someone out to represent the Muslim community, we are to do our due diligence and see if this person can represent Islam in the most accurate way. From two aspects. One is the aspect of knowledge. The person should actually be aware of what he or she is saying. But there's another aspect of, does the person know on how to present? This is another important aspect that we overlook. Because not everything that is truthful is to be said, as we'll learn in this story. There's a certain wisdom. There's a certain wisdom of how you go about presenting things. So they choose Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. And Ja'far, he comes. And when he comes there, he says to the negus, he enters and he does not prostrate. He does not do sajda in front of Najashi. And immediately the ministers and everybody, they're saying that, look, Ja'far came in, he's so arrogant, he never even made sajda to him. And Amr ibn al-As and Umar, when they came in, they made sajda. Because they're used to doing sajda to idols anyways. So for them, making a sajda to a living person is actually easier, right? You do a sajda to stones all day. If you have to do sajda to a king, what's the big deal? And Ja'far is asked. Ja'far says, look, we don't do sajda to other than Allah. It's a principle of our religion. We respect you, we honor you, but this is just our something particular to our religion. And then Najashi was an understanding king. He understands that's part of your religion. He says, that's fine. He says, tell me. He says, tell me, مَا تَقُولُونَ لِلرَّجُلِ إِذَا جِئْتُمُوهُ. Tell me that what do you say about this man that has come to you? And the Muslims beforehand, when they were selecting Ja'far, they had agreed that we would not lie. We are Muslims, but we don't lie. When he asks us, we'll tell him the truth. And so, they spent their night before worried. Because now you know that it's life or death. You're going in front of the emperor. What if he hands us back to the people of Quraysh? He hands us back to the people of Quraysh. We're done for, right? We have nothing left over. So he ends up, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, he says, no, we have to say the truth. This is what the Prophet ﷺ told us. He told us to teach the truth, and I know how to present it. I'll do a good job, don't worry. So he comes in, and he says to him very beautifully in a few words. He says, أيها الملك, O King, Your Highness, كنا قوما أهل جاهلية. We were a people of ignorance. Literally, he uses the word jahiliyyah. And we would worship idols. وَنَأْكُلُ الْمَيْتَةِ. And we would eat the animal that was slaughtered for other than Allah. Or we would eat an animal that was simply had been slaughtered a while ago and is just laying there, or it was not slaughtered in the proper way. Something that's unethical, obviously, to anybody. So, and this is a civilized society. Because if you know Makkah is a very backward society. You have Bedouins. The people of Abyssinia, they're very educated people, they're very cultured people. وَنَأْتِ الْفَوَاحِشِ. And we are very vulgar people, right? And we didn't have an idea of nikah. We simply fornicate with any woman that we want. وَنَقْطَعُ الْأَرْحَامِ. And we don't keep our family ties. We're fighting over very small things. Every little while you come back, there's a new fight between two tribes, right? And he mentioned a number of other things. He says, then this prophet came to us. And he was no normal man. He was a person that was from the best lineage, a truthful man, an honest man, a man of the people. He came to us, so why should we reject his message? When he taught us everything that is related to goodness. He taught us about how to be respectful. He taught us iffa and amana and sidq. He taught us truthfulness. He taught us what it meant to be pure and chaste. And along with all of this, he told us to worship Allah and leave idol worship. And this is what we do. And he explained to him, Salama says, عَدَّدَ عَلَيْهِ نُورَ الْإِسْلَامِ, the very pillars of Islam, a very Islam 101. He explains to him what it is. And then the Najashi, he says, then why did you leave? Why did you leave this prophet? So he said, فَلَمَّا قَهَرُونَا وَظَلَمُونَا وَضَيَّقُوا عَلَيْنَا. He said, we never wanted to leave our people. But understand that these people, they oppressed us and they forced us to leave. حَالُوا بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَ دِينِنَا. They became a barrier between us and our religion. We had no other option left. Then خَرَجْنَا إِلَى بِلَادِكَ. We came to your land and we chose you because we know that you are a just king. And رَجَوْنَا أَنْ لَا نُظْلَمَ عِنْدَكَ. And we know that we are not going to be oppressed here. This is why we're here. Very simple. And then Najashi, he asked him, he says, do you have anything? Can you recite for me something? That is from what Muhammad ﷺ has brought from Allah, his revelation. So Ja'far was an excellent qari, and he began to recite. And he recited the first few pages of Surah Maryam, one of the most beautiful conversations. كَافْ هَا عَيْنْ صَادٍ ذِكْرُ رَحْمَةِ رَبِّكَ عَبْدَهُ زَكَرِيَّا. The first page is the story of Zakaria, and as a Christian he can relate immediately. Then وَذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَرْيَمَ. Then he says of the story of Maryam. What a beautiful story. Surah Maryam describes the birth of Isa alayhi salam. He reads all of that. And then he reads the part about Isa alayhi salam. قَالَ إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ. What did Isa alayhi salam, when he spoke as a baby, what did he say? He reads all of that. And Salama says, حَتَّى خْضَلَّتْ لِحْيَتُهُ. he began to cry. The emperor was crying. He was so moved by this. Because obviously, you can see what Ja'far chose to recite. He was honest and truthful, but he was diplomatic as well. He chose the ayat that he knew that the Negus could relate to. Surah Maryam. Obviously, being a Christian, you can relate because Isa alayhi salam is being talked about. And this is not something modern or something that's we've come up with today. It's there from the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. It's there in the Quran itself, right? One of the common understandings of interfaith dialogue is that we say that we talk about what we agree upon. This is in the Quran. قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ. Allah Azza wa Jalla says, say to the people of the book, let's come and let's talk about what we agree on and work from there. So Ja'far ibn Abi Talib is diplomatic and he says this. And Najashi is very moved and he says that إِنَّ هَذَا وَالَّذِي جَاءَ بِهِ عِيسَى لَيَخْرُجُ مِن مِشْكَاةٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. He said, what you've read and the matters that you speak about, what your prophet teaches, this and what Isa brought, min mishkatin wahida. These are from one source. I know this is from one source, and they all are the same things. فَلَا وَاللَّهِ لَا أُسْلِمُ مَا إِلَيْكُمَا وَلَا يَكَادُونَ. And then he turns to the people of Quraysh and says, look, I can't send these people back with you. They've done nothing wrong. And you are free to live here. At that point, Amr ibn al-As, he sees everything is failed. And he says that tomorrow, let me sleep tonight, and tomorrow I'll come up with something. I'll attack the Muslims in a way in front of the Negus that they'll have no option. The Negus will have no option but to send him back, and I'll attack him using the theology. I'll say that they are blasphemous to Isa alayhi salam. And when they hear that when they hear that the Muslims hate Jesus Christ, we love Isa alayhi salam, he's a prophet of Allah, when they hear this, he'll expel him. And so he comes up with a scheme, and we'll talk about, inshallah, in our next halaqah, we'll talk about what he did and how he presented that, and how Ja'far, he refuted him at that particular moment. There's a great lesson to learn in that long khutbah that Ja'far radiallahu anhu will give. And before we leave, very quickly, I want to leave you with a reflection. And that is the fact that there are many lessons that we learn from this, and I mentioned so many of them, but the one thing that, if you do not take home anything, this is the one thing I think you can take home. Many of us, we make an excuse, and particularly in this particular scenario, we feel we can't relate to it, right? Because they're immigrating, we're not being persecuted. But even in immigration, we can understand it from our perspective. See, many people will say that I don't live close to the masjid. I can't, my schedule is such, or I'm in a city as such where there aren't programs, I can't bring my kids to the masjid, the youth don't have a safe space, etc., etc. And while some people may have that excuse, and that's fine, everybody's conditions are different, but at the same time, there has to be a sacrifice that we make. There has to be a sacrifice that we make, and that is our hijrah. Our immigration is this, that if we have to sacrifice, and many people, they've come up to me, they've told me about different job offers that they received, and after visiting the cities, although there might have been a slight difference in what they were getting compensated with, they chose the city that was the best for their family, and they had the best Muslim community. That was in their priorities. And we need to learn to prioritize, along with other things, prioritize the masjid, the Muslim community. These avenues, prioritize them for the sake of preserving our faith. The Muslims didn't leave there because they liked Abyssinia. They left there to preserve their faith. And for us, if we have to preserve our faith and we have to leave something that apparently it seems difficult to do, or something beloved, then that's a price we may have to pay to save our religion. And if we are not in that position, or if we can't relate to these people at all, then there is still a lesson for us. And that is why I'm wearing this hat. I asked, about 10 people came up to me saying, what's this kind of hat you're wearing? This is not a normal hat. This is the hat of the Uyghur people, or the Uyghur people. Right? There's a brother, I don't know if Brother Olan is here. He gifted it to me. When he was speaking about the Uyghur people are going through what the Muslims were going through in Mecca. Right? They are the most persecuted people for what we call ethnic cleansing today. They have done nothing wrong other than that they are Muslim. And they follow a particular religion. You can look up online and see the documentaries in East Turkmenistan and what they have to go through. If we can do anything, the least that we can do, and I hope that this hat you remember, the least that we can do for our brothers and sisters in India, Kashmir, and all over the world, Palestine, and Sham, and all of these places, the least we can do is at least raise our voice for them. There's many avenues. If we have to call the senator, we have to sign a petition, whatever it is that we think it's small. We're not kings, we're not the king of Abyssinia, we can't give them a safe place to stay, but we can raise some awareness about them, we can speak for them, and if we can't even speak for them, the least that we can do is make a dua for them, and at least remember them, and not live in our own bubbles and completely be isolated from what the Muslims are going through. I hope that serves as some take-home reflection, inshallah. A few announcements before we leave, inshallah. Next week is the first Monday of February, so we will have our pizza party and our prize draw. So inshallah, make sure that you're there for the pizza with your kids, and we'll have a change of menu for the adults. Also, the Umrah trip that we have, the deadlines have been extended to the end of the month of January, so you have a few days if you'd like to sign up. And also, inshallah, this Saturday, many of you may have heard the tragic news of Kobe Bryant passing away yesterday in the helicopter crash. This Saturday, in our weekly Misla Halaqa, I'll speak about Kobe Bryant, and I'll speak about death, and what are the lessons that we can learn from this particular incident, and a fresh look at our own lives as well, inshallah. So join us for the Misla Halaqa this Saturday after Dhuhr as well. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Inshallah, please head downstairs to the refreshments.